Alright, we got a very interesting topic for today's Critical Thought. We're going to be discussing the motivations behind single player and multiplayer design, and whether these two polarizing elements can come together in some way, shape, or form. I was having a conversation with other Josh about this very recently, and he posed a very interesting question. What do I think requires more skill? Being the best player at Sekiro or Dark Souls? Or being the best player at Call of Duty? And it's a question that I know a lot of you will immediately rush to answer one way or the other. But it really represents kind of the two differing elements when it comes to gameplay and the motivation that goes into playing these games. Other Josh and I are quite different in terms of the games we like to play. I'm more on the single player side, he's more on the multiplayer. For me, I don't find it all that rewarding to try and master a multiplayer game the same way as I would a single player, and he's the complete opposite. And for everyone watching, where do you fall? Do you prefer single player or multiplayer design? Let me know in the comments below. But when it comes to designing or playing a video game, both kinds of gameplay offer different reward systems for how you play them, and as well as how they're designed. When you play a single player video game, these titles are built around a fixed element or a fixed set of nodes. When I play a game that has 10 levels, it means I have 10 levels to go through. Beat level 10, that's it, we're done, we move on to the next game. The rewards are built entirely around getting you motivated to keep playing that game. When I finish Sekiro, there is no extrinsic reward to that. I didn't run out into the street screaming, I mastered Sekiro, and annoyed all my neighbors. And this is one of the very interesting aspects behind the growth and use of achievements over the past decade. That was a way of providing that kind of extrinsic motivation to playing these single player games. Now, when you play a multiplayer title, that is different in terms of its design and, again, the motivation. Multiplayer games are inherently built not on having a fixed outcome and fixed end. There are no 10 levels to beat in Mortal Kombat 11 online play, and then I'm the greatest player. No, they're designed to keep you playing, to keep more people coming in, and keep changing how that game plays. Again, the joys of single-player design are the very fact that it is about mastering a closed system. And keep that in the back of your mind, because I'll be talking more about that in a few minutes. When you play multiplayer, however, there is no set experience. If I'm playing against one person who is a Guile player in Street Fighter, if I play against someone who's Zangief, that's a different way of playing, or a different experience of that same core gameplay loop. And that is the design around a multiplayer game. That you're always having to react and respond to what's going on and what you're going up against. No two matches should play exactly the same. And as we've talked about before, when we get to kind of grandmaster levels of play with fighting games or whatever, you can even see the person's own personality or the way they play kind of bleed into that gameplay. And these are all ways, again, of keeping that experience from becoming set or repetitive. Now, another big point, though, is that multiplayer games are built around extrinsic motivation. It's not just you sitting in your home or at your computer playing a game. No, you are competing with somebody else. There is somebody sharing that experience with you, whether it is your opponent that you're going to either win or lose against, or an audience. Again, the major point about esports is convincing people that hundreds of thousands of people want to watch Grandmaster play on TV or on your computer or anything like that. And again, I'm sure quite a few of you who are watching this video right now do watch an esports or some kind of tournament level play. And Again, that's a big motivation behind multiplayer design. If you're going for people who are more motivated around multiplayer gameplay, do you want to spend the next 10 to 15 hours trying to learn a game that nobody will ever see you play? Or do you want to try and learn a game that you can have an audience of people watching you? Or maybe even try to compete in a tournament for a prize of some kind? One of the biggest points about EVO is the fact that it is an open submission. As long as you can show up at EVO on match or tournament day, you can attend that tournament. And everybody loves that underdog story of somebody coming in and trying to dominate like that. But again, the point still stands that it's different levels of motivation, different levels of design that affect single and multiplayer games. And the big question, though, is can you design a game that handles both? And that is a very tough question to answer, because we have seen developers, especially in the AAA space, try and balance these two aspects. Again, any video game that has a single player and a PvP mode is proof positive of this. But typically what ends up happening is that most players will prefer one or the other. They may either play the game for the story or the PvP, but not both. And we can see this also in what happens when the two paths try to cross. Anyone who's played StarCraft, for instance, knows that playing the campaign of StarCraft, no matter how great you are at it, is a 100% completely different experience than playing it online ranked mode. The same goes for any fighting game, CCG, you name it. And for many developers out there, it's very hard to the point of impossible to try and get those two audiences to meet. Blizzard in recent years has just basically threw their hands up and say, you know what? Here's a StarCraft single player, here's a StarCraft multiplayer, and they will never interact with each other. And that can sometimes work. It is, of course, a lot more time and money, though, designing two completely different game systems. But it can help your audience out like that. And again, kind of hedge your bet that anyone who's going to buy your game is going to get something out of it. But as I said a few minutes ago, that this whole idea of competing and showing off high-level play, for a lot of people, again, when I say that phrase, most of your mind's tuned to EVO, to fighting, to tournaments, the E-League, etc. But we're going to switch to our Patreon thank you and sponsor in a second. But when we get back, I want to talk about how things may have developed in another way, and how this was kind of what people expected high-level play or professional play to be about 20 to 25 years ago. And now for a quick thank you to our Patreon backers, as well as to our current Game Wisdom sponsors. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. If you're a fan of Game Wisdom and looking for a little bit of collectible swag, anyone who donates $25 or more via Super Chat or on patreon.com/WBycer will get your hands on this lovely little Josh box. This is a hand-detailed box that comes with a USB drive containing 10 hours of some of my favorite podcasts done throughout the years. This is only available for the month of April 2019. Afterwards, we'll have to weigh in and see if people want more Josh boxes in the future. So if you're interested, be sure to get those donations in now before this offer runs out. Here's some footage of my world record run on Cuphead that I made about a year or so ago. And as I said in the last part, when many people think about the motivation for playing video games, single versus multiplayer, it comes down to intrinsic versus extrinsic rewards. But over the last few years, though, we've seen kind of a switch or alternative to this with the form of speedrunning. Speedrunning is essentially the grandmaster version of playing a single-player game. You are still relying on playing a closed experience, but you are doing it at a level much higher than what anyone else would think would be possible. And the speedrunning community, again, or speedrunning in general, is what we kind of thought tournament level video gameplay was going to be back in the day. Again, the older people remember the movie The Wizard, or a lot of those older shows like that had like video game competitions like Starcade, Nick Arcade. I think there may be another one. But for a lot of people, that's what they thought the future of competitive video game playing was going to be. And that all changed when the rise of the fighting game genre back in, I think that was 91 or 92 with Street Fighter 2. But over the last few years with the growth of speedrunning, we're kind of seeing things come back in its own way. That you can have an extrinsic motivation to play and master a single player game. And that is being able to have a world record in these kinds of titles. And we have seen entire communities grow around each one of these games and around speedrunning generally to try and get everyone together like this. And again, anyone who's played, or if you have not tried to speedrun a game, it is a different experience than playing it casually. Again, this is my world record attempt, or I actually did have a world record in Cuphead. This was a long time ago. I'm sure this has been beaten by then. But again, playing these games at this level is akin to, again, that mastery that we see in competitive games. And going back to that original question of what would be harder to learn, it really is two sides of the same coin. And I don't think it is possible to equate the two together. The reason is that somebody who is a pro-level speedrunner, I don't think they would have the skill set to be a pro-level competitive player, and vice versa. When you're playing a single-player game, it is about refinement, memorization, and essentially practicing a fixed element. Like when I'm playing Cuphead here during this fight, this came down to practicing and figuring out how to beat this boss in the quickest way possible. And again, that came through a lot of practice in this game just by myself. Oh, I just failed right there too. That's good. But for a multiplayer game or a competitive game, it's not about learning a set routine or a set strategy. It's about being adaptable to a variety of situations. It's about knowing that I'm going to fight an opponent who is a Chun-Li player, but everything that player can do, I have to be able to respond to it, and I don't know when it's going to happen. When you watch many speedrunners, a big part of playing games at that level is understanding how to exploit the AI, knowing exactly what it means to get the AI to do what you want, and more importantly, being able to predict it based on that actions. I think with this run, I'm actually going to break the AI at least a little bit. Did I get it? No. But if you fight this boss quick enough, you can actually break the AI. And again, that just comes from learning these games. And that takes both time and takes practice. People who do glitch runs of games will usually have to perform actions that are frame perfect or near frame perfect to get them going. And this was something that Josh brought up to me about the finer points of playing multiplayer games. He described games like Forza, Call of Duty, etc. that feature very small technical as in the player skill performing them, like these little tricks in terms of mastery. And he said that a lot of people don't understand those finer points. They just see Call of Duty as a game where you run around, put a cursor on a character, and click the button. But there's a lot in terms of high-level play there. And a lot of those techniques and little optimizations are very much the same that we see in the speedrunning community or in speedrunning games. Being able to, again, manipulate the AI, understanding where you can actually glitch through a wall or skip a trigger. These are small, minute elements that can come back and help you in a very big way. One of the early examples, of probably one that's kind of more known, was in StarCraft. I think this was either in StarCraft or StarCraft 2 at the time. What they did was, if you start a Zergling, or if you're Zerg, and you start to build or use a larva to create something, if you cancel at the right time, you can get an extra larva to do something else before you need to improve your supply. And that was basically common knowledge for a lot of people who played StarCraft. But that again is an example of one of those little tips and tricks that the game doesn't necessarily explain to you, but it becomes a big role in optimizing and mastering these titles. But to begin to wrap things up, or I could just let this whole video me play out, both single player and multiplayer designs have their own forms of design and their own reasons or motivations to play them. And it does become very hard for a lot of people to try and bridge that gap. If you're playing a game for single player purposes, you may not want to compete with other people. Just as if you want that competition, you want that show of proof of your mastery, you don't want to play a game where no one will ever see you do it. But it's very interesting how these two are being combined, not so much from the design standpoint, but what we see today in terms of streamer and YouTuber culture. How many of you have watched somebody play a single player game all the way through, or watch Grandmaster Speedrunning? Or again, if you watch a pro fighting game player or Dota player or whatever, play these games at that level. And it's a very interesting time, again, in terms of defining what it means to experience video games. And with the original question, again, I don't think ultimately that's going to be possible to combine both. The ultimate game that can be enjoyed entirely single player and entirely multiplayer. Because again, the two designs are different. And again, for the games that try to combine them, it always feels like something is lacking. But with that said, here's my final question for you. Can you think of games that did do that? That did manage to find the happy medium of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation? That somebody can enjoy it entirely single player, and somebody can enjoy it entirely for multiplayer as well. But here's the catch. It cannot be completely different game modes. It has to be, it can't just be a single player campaign and multiplayer like in Call of Duty. It's got to be one gameplay loop that can accommodate both kinds of play. But while you guys think about that, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you're new, be sure to check out our Discord channel and Patreon link down below, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. If you're looking for a book on design, my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, is out now. It is available where most books are sold, and it comes in paper, hardcover, or digital copies. This is the perfect book for anyone interested in learning about game design, whether you are a student, enthusiast, or just a fan. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.